and you're listening to the Brown Perspective. This is your host, Eduardo, and I'm here with your co host, R.O. El Mero Mero.
Hey, hey, what's going on?
Not much, man. Are you excited? Super Bowl weekend is here.
I don't want to be a downer, but I'm not as excited as you are.
I know. I'm excited, even though my beloved Patriots are not on the Super Bowl. And I know haters are happy to the fact that the Patriots are not in the Super Bowl this time around. But don't worry. Don't worry. We'll be back in the big dance soon enough.
Would I be considered a hater if I told you that the Patriots already won enough Super Bowls, so I would be okay if they don't go to the Super Bowl for the next 20 to 30 years?
Yeah, that's messed up. That's like saying like Brazil shouldn't win more World Cups because they already won five.
Yeah, they shouldn't. They already have enough. Mexico should win. Mexico should win some.
Oh man. Okay, the next episode we'll talk about some of the eliminatorias que la estamos sufriendo for
Yeah, yeah.
suffering those World Cup. But no, you have a point, and I was gonna say to all the fans and not so much fans of the Patriots, I think watch Men in the Arena. I think it's a pretty good perspective on Tom Brady and more importantly on the team and the sort of the ethos that goes there. Obviously, it covers the controversy and a lot of things that happened during his 20 seasons there.
Hmm.
And we know that he retired just last weekend, so that's interesting. But I think tying it to the topic that we want to cover today, we want to talk about the Brian Flores lawsuit of the NFL. So Brian Flores, who came up within the Patriots organization, he started at the bottom and he made it all the way to assistant coach. And then from the Patriots, he was able to land a head coaching job over at the Miami Dolphins. And he did a really good job in the 3 seasons that he was there. I think you can tell his seriousness, his dedication, and I thought he was turning around the the franchise. But then all of a sudden, uh, this year we heard news that they let him go. So that was as soon as I heard that, I was like, that's interesting. Why would
And
you let a good coach out, even if if he's winning?
he
Why would you
won.
fire a coach?
He won 8 of the last 9 games.
Yeah, and last season they even beat the Patriots, made the Patriots look silly a couple of years ago. And but overall, I mean, it looked like he and his coaching staff were turning things around, but then he's let go. And I think immediately I knew like, oh, that's messed up. I think they probably did that because he's a black coach, right? And how many times do black coaches and minority coaches not given the chance to fail to the same degree that you know the white coaches are?
But
So I think
do you still think he failed, even though obviously they didn't make the playoffs, they don't go far into the playoffs, but he won 8 of the last 9 games. That's pretty good. And
it
then there's
is.
there's a controversy around whether or not the owner was trying to bribe him to lose games. So this is something we can touch on later as a possible
Mhm.
reason why he may have been fired.
No, that's a good point, and I know that that's part of the things that he wasn't fired because he didn't took that guidance from the corporate office or from the owner to to tank the season so they could get another first round pick.
Hmm.
Um, so all that to say that that was why his firing was so surprising. He had only been there 3 years. He had a winning record, no scandal that we know of, except for sort of everything that's coming out to light now with with being asked to tank the season. So it's just unfortunate, and now you have someone like Flores who's a coach, right? So like being a star quarterback is one thing, but now you're a head coach that has decided to a fairly young coach with a lot of promise, who he could have stayed quiet about this stuff and he could have been hired eventually, or maybe not, right? Maybe he wouldn't have been hired. He would have had to go back to being an assistant, as sometimes head coaches do. But he's put it on the line because I think he felt wronged by what
I
happened
mean,
to him and other black coaches.
it's possible that he would have been hired eventually. We can't say for sure. We also, honestly speaking, I can't say for sure whether or not it's racism or discrimination that's at play here. if that's the reason why he didn't get the job. I think part of the reason why we're having this discussion is because we're exploring that. And
Hmm.
I do think that it's likely that it was discrimination, but again, I can't prove it. And that's what makes these cases really difficult. So why don't we talk a little bit about what his allegations are against the NFL? The one that I'm familiar with is the one which is probably the most well-known one, with the interview with the Giants,
Hmm.
where he said that he had landed for an interview and he was exchanging text messages with Belichick. Bill Belichick thought that he was talking to somebody else, and told him, "Oh yeah, you pretty much, you have the job, that they're going to go for you." And then Brian Flores clarified with Belichick, "It's like, wait, are you talking to the right person? Because this is Brian Flores." And Belichick's like, "Oh crap, my bad."
Hmm.
Just forget everything I said. But so what's happened? Belichick essentially told him the Giants already have their man, even though the Giants hadn't even interviewed that other coach,
Hmm.
and the coach that supposedly the Giants already had as a white coach. And so just based on that, that's part of his allegation, that it was just a sham interview, that they were just interviewing him because of the, it's called the
Rule. Yep.
Rooney rule, that you just have to interview a minority candidate just to check that box to say that you
Hmm.
did it, and that's why they were doing it. But he had no chance of getting that job.
Yes. And actually, before we continue the conversation, let me just point out that Fritz Pollard, who is named in this article up on top, he was, I believe, the first black coach of the league. He is a Brown alum. So I know that. Just wanted to point out, since we're talking about the Brown perspective and we are proud Brunonians, wanted to highlight that connection that the school has with the first African American coach.
Yeah, man, right on.
Hashtag ever true.
Are there any other aspects to his lawsuit apart from this interview with the Giants?
I think the other big piece, I think he also highlights some of the problems that he had with Miami, obviously, who let him go, and also with the Broncos, who apparently were also doing the same as the Giants. And I think the other main piece is that it was filed as a class action lawsuit. So that means that additional players can join, right? So you can potentially have a Colin Kaepernick or some other players who decide to, or coaches who decide to step up and join in this fight.
Yeah. Well, like I said before, it's going to be hard to prove this, just because the type of overt racism that's easy to prove, those days are gone. It's really hard. The discrimination that happens, it's subtle, and there's always an excuse that the corporations can use. The NFL came out and said, we take diversity hiring very seriously, and we put a lot of effort into it and resources. So they're gonna say what they're gonna say, what their HR department tells them to. When it comes to, okay, he got fired from the Miami Dolphins. He was winning towards the end of
Hmm.
the season. You know how difficult it is to get a good coach to get you on a winning streak? That winning streak, any office would have said, "Oh, let's go with this guy. We have a good shot next year, especially if the roster's not going to change too much." It's very likely that what happened there was just some conflict between the owner and Flores, if the owner did want him to lose games so that they would get uh, better picks in the draft. And
Hmm.
I would say I can't prove that, but it's weird. It is weird that they fired him with that winning record. But so maybe it could go either way, right? That we need more information there. With the Giants, again, it's difficult to say. Even if Belichick had caught some rumors or had some discussions with the Giants staff, and the Giants were saying, yeah, we're really favoring this white coach from this other team, that still doesn't mean that they weren't considering others. They probably just said he looks to be a good fit. We're gonna talk to him. There's a good chance that we might take him, but we're gonna talk to other guys, and maybe we change our decision. Maybe someone like Brian Flores comes in, and they realize, like, oh crap, let's go with this guy. He won his last 8 games. Let's give him a shot. So it's really difficult to prove that, because how how do you go about, just based on what he has presented, just based on that? It's possible that it is. It's just, I'm not saying that racism or discrimination may not be at play. I'm saying, how do you prove that?
Well, it is challenging, and I guess that will be up to the courts to decide. But I think that you can also look at the evidence, right? Um, at the circumstantial evidence, you have a winning coach that, unless he had any disciplinary problems, was there a cause for him to be fired? And maybe their contracts are so that they can be let go for any reason, right? Whatsoever, which can be the case. But then the fact that you had Coach Belichick, and again, the Patriots connection, um, who made the confusion, who either was rooting for the other guy or
Mm-hmm.
somehow influencing in the process. Like, to your point, yes, maybe they would have been happily surprised, but if somehow Belichick already had gotten wind that they were going to hire Brian Dabble, I think was his name,
Mm-hmm.
instead, it shows that the even if, like, what you describe would be very unlikely, right? So, and it just shows how unfair the current process, and how ineffective the Rooney Rule is, because they just have to check the box. It's not like they have to prove that they made a good effort to look for the candidate, to hire them, and then once they're in the job, to give them the support they need to be able to take the teams all the way to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, but what if they had a feeling that Brian Flores was maybe could be a fit, but maybe not, depending on his style. Maybe he favors a particular style of play that the Giants don't have, and maybe they were just talking to him just to see if they could work something out. But again, there's so many reasons. It's, even if he's qualified, even if he did a good job in Miami, it doesn't automatically mean that they'll think he'll be a good fit with the Giants.
Yeah, no, fair point. But I think and I think what the lawsuit is getting at is, it wasn't just the Giants. In some ways, it was Miami, but also the Broncos, right? So if then it's not just one team issue, is an entire league that has a problem. So it's a
Right, but
more
that's
systematic. And the fact that since he was fired, there's now only one active coach in the NFL, one black coach in the NFL, when there's 70% of the players are
yeah, Mike
black or
Tomlin
African
from
American.
from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah, that's a tough one because what you're saying is that all three incidents with the Miami Dolphins, with the Broncos, with the Giants, that there's racism and discrimination involved. And
And maybe there's no discrimination, but maybe it's just improper colluding.
it's possible, but I mean, they did hire him in the first place, right? I'm just thinking, okay, what's the probability that every single team in the NFL, every single management office for the teams, is racist and will discriminate just based on somebody being black or Hispanic? And see, so here's the thing. That's why it's so hard to prove, because I don't think that today that the entire NFL is like racist. There's different degrees, but you're probably gonna find some teams, some offices that are genuinely trying to hire, and they'll just go for the best candidate. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, this goes back to that problem where we just don't have enough candidates out there to begin with either. We have very few, right? So how do
I
you?
think there's more talented African American and minority coaches now that there ever were
Well,
before.
I was hearing that they're mostly on the defensive side, defensive coordinators. On offense, it's still predominantly white. That's at least
Yeah, and I mean,
even not
and
head coaches, but also
that's another indication. Just like there's a limited number of African American quarterbacks, offensive, and for the most part, the offense, the quarterback is seen as the leader of the team, right? So I think you can see how the bias against black players is kind of impacts the whole chain of of what is it of the chain of becoming a coach, and they even get into the executives. Now that I think about it, when you think of all of the former players who are now involved with the business side of football, all of them for the most part are white, right? Elway,
Mm-hmm.
uh, Lynch up in San Francisco,
But
right?
the
And even if it's an African American or two, like I don't, and again, I'm not a good measure for somebody who really pays to what's going on in the NFL, but there's certainly not that many as they should be based on how many amazing African American players there are there.
Yep, right. But what I'm trying to parse out here is the current situation with the league versus the pipeline of the candidates that are available. So, for example, the pipeline of the candidates that are out looking job search, hunting for a coaching position, for trying to buy teams and so forth, that's very small still. That pool, it's very small, especially when you compare it to the percentage of African Americans in the league and Latinos in this case. And that you could attribute that to systemic discrimination and racism because historically they were, black quarterbacks were put into different positions or told to be in a different position, not the quarterback position again, because they didn't think that blacks could lead the team. Same thing for coaches, right? So because the pool was smaller, has been small historically, it could be the case now that the teams are trying to make a concerted effort to be more diverse and to hire African American coaches, but the pipeline hasn't caught up to so that it can reflect.
They make the pipeline bigger.
Exactly, but how do you make it bigger if it's a systemic thing? You can't do it over a year or two. It takes time, and it's not going to be perfect because what you're trying to do is you're trying to correct something that was inherently unfair. And so how do you correct that? How do you get more African American players that are candidates to be coaches? Well, first of all, they have to have the experience, right? They have to go through that, and it has to start somewhere. And I think we're going through that process. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I wouldn't find it hard to believe to say that some teams are still discriminating, either knowingly or unknowingly. Others may not be. But to say that the Miami Dolphins fired him because of discrimination, that the Giants didn't hire him because of race/discrimination, and that the Broncos didn't hire him because of that, just the probability of that, I don't see it as, I see it as like a low probability. But again, I'm just kind of going based on the situation that we are starting to see more black quarterbacks. We are starting to see at least more defensive coordinators that are black. They did hire Brian Flores. It's definitely not where it should be, but at least it does seem to be going in the right direction, even though we haven't gotten to where we are. So I don't know how he proves his case ultimately. That's also what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. And to your point, I mean, one of the other ways that you bring about change is through litigation and through courts. So this is what this case will be all about, right? So if let's say he's able to successfully challenge or at least make it seem like the NFL really needs to compromise in order to sort of get this story to go away, and maybe they do decide to do some really good reforms, as you said, it will be thanks to this lawsuit, but also obviously the lawsuit of Colin Kaepernick, the example of Tony Dungy, and some of the other black quarterbacks, like a lot of the sacrifices, right? So it will be something that they will earn. It will be something that, and I think for Brian Flores, I do hope that he gets hired again. But obviously now it's going to be really difficult because you only have, you know, the teams, the 32 teams,
Yeah, it's gonna be hard
and
for him
yeah,
because teams could just say we want to stay away from any political drama or anything of that sort, because that's the excuse they use with Kaepernick, that they
yeah.
don't want any distractions, right? So that's code
And
word.
now the league, after what happened with George Floyd, right? They tried to say all these things and sort of acknowledge what Colin was referring to, right? So it was only a matter
Mm-hmm.
of a few years and really some tragic episodes that there's greater awareness about why would athletes, African American and Afro Latino and other minority athletes would protest that. And I want to highlight the fact that in England, in the Premier League, the players are still kneeling before the start of every game.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be, you know, symbolic for some. I'm sure that some still don't believe it, and the English fans can be pretty racist at times, but at least there's still continues to be an acknowledgement that racism is something that needs to be rooted out of soccer, needs to be rooted out of football, needs to be rooted out of
Mm-hmm.
sports in general.
Well, you know what would also change this, and it would probably change it a lot faster, but it's also incredibly difficult. If the coaches that we do have in coordinating positions in defense or even offense, if those coaches, the black coaches and Latino or Afro Latino coaches, started kicking ass, like if they started really making a big impact, winning games, making defenses really strong,
Well,
feared.
that's what Brian Flores was doing in Miami.
I know, but he's one guy, right? He's one guy, and it's this is a numbers game. This is really just what it comes down to. We just need more of them doing it, and we're gonna get super talented ones. You get one guy or two guys, the chances that they're the ones that are like amazing and great, it's just probability. The probability is very low. We need a lot more, and we do have a lot of African American defensive coordinators. If they start outperforming their peers, they'll get called up to head position jobs because at the end of the day, what trumps racism, what trumps discrimination is whether or not the team is winning and making money. Capitalism, baby.
It's true. That's why the leagues, both the baseball league, the NFL, and so many other leagues were integrated, right? Because they
They wanted
knew
to win.
that
Yeah.
they needed to be the best they could be.
Yeah, obviously both approaches work, and if Flores, if this lawsuit, if they can find ways to present their case, if they can point to incidents, if they have a good case, then yeah, hopefully it brings about change, especially if other players join the lawsuit. But we'll see. Ultimately, we don't, just a disclaimer here before we wrap up. It's not that, we don't want the NFL punished. We're not trying to say don't watch the NFL. We're trying to say we want it to be more fair if it's not. And, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt that they're trying. And again, that's why I'm not automatically siding with Brian Flores here. I don't know if you're disappointed in that or not, but I'm just going based on on what I see so far. And it's just hard to see if he's going to be able to prove. Not necessarily because it didn't happen the way that he says it, but also because human resource departments in companies are very clever, and they'll find the right language to get out of this if there's not like a smoking gun that he can point to.
Yes. I mean, it's not disappointing. I think for me, just highlights the point that there's going to be a lot of people who approach and will see this issue from your perspective, and rightfully so. So I think it just gives me insight as to perhaps what other people who don't see this case as black and white, as perhaps I do and others do, perhaps as Brian Flores does, that's the kind of challenge, that's the kind of logic,
Mm-hmm.
that's the kind of of things of logic that you're gonna have to disprove. And I think I just mentioned how ironic it is that Brian Flores got fired, and then the Dolphins hired the former 49ers offensive coordinator Michael McDaniel, who
Yeah,
is half black and half white.
there you go. Yeah,
So in some ways, you have a dark-skinned coach who was replaced by a light-skinned black coach, right? And now you have the whole issue of colorism and everything is like that. That is an important conversation that we're having within the Latino community and also within the African community, African American community.
I didn't know that they had hired a half black, half white coach. What I do know with Brian Flores is that we'll find out in the next few years. If he gets a job somewhere else, then maybe there wasn't much to it. But if he doesn't get a job in the NFL again, then yeah, then we'll know. Okay, we still have big problems here because he won eight
Maybe
of those last 9 games. That's huge. That winning 8 of 9 games in a season, just that alone almost gets you into the playoffs. And he did it in 9 games, right?
hmm
So it's not a stretch to say this guy can get teams into the playoffs.
I think the other option will be that he'll may get a job with the new football league that's coming later this year, the United States Football League. Woohoo! So there'll be
What?
two leagues and more opportunities for people to get concussions and do it in the name of sports.
Yeah. All right, let's wrap it up there. Any final thoughts? Any last words?
No, that's it. I've said what I wanted to say.
All right, for all you out there, if you enjoy our content, make sure to check us out. We are Brown Perspective. Nos vemos.
Ciao.